Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my show Camera Tuesday. In today's episode, we're gonna talk about why no to Panasonic. So let's dive right into it. Well, if you have checked my playlist recently, you must have noticed I am talking about bad about every damn company. The reason for that is I want people to basically grow up to a point where they are no longer fanboy. They have to understand if they buy something, they will gain something and they will lose something. For example, like Sony gives you a very surprisingly good price to performance ratio, but they have very bad after sales support. Basically, if your camera physically breaks, good luck trying to repair that. Again, Canon might give you like a very bad price to performance ratio, but they do have better lens support system. So again, there are always pros and cons with this. That is the reason why I'm making this whole series. Why not basically why not to Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, Canon, everything. That is the reason. Basically, you have to understand that point. Basically, companies are out there to give you something. They want to give you as little as possible, while you want to pay them as little as possible. The balance you have to find out depending on your need. So first we have to understand what is the great about Panasonic. Well, you have to understand the mirrorless, the quote unquote mirrorless. They started this as early as 2008 and 9. Now they come together with basically Olympus, and they are like, okay, let's create a micro four third system. Now you have to understand this. A four third was already an old system, it was already well established, and there was even DSLRs of that. So then the question becomes, why the heck you don't hear about that? Again, the DSLR did not took off, quote unquote, but the security camera department and other optical equipments, they ran with it. Basically, many security cameras are using basically four third sensors. So sensor was available in mass, basically flat out. It was more popular than APS-C even in some regards. So they took that, and what does micro mean? Micro simply means they remove the mirror box in front of that, and they created the system. Now both companies, Olympus and Panasonic, they knew for a fact that neither of them are big enough to compete against basically Canon and Nikon. So at that time Sony was not even like a serious threat. So what they came together and they created an open lens mount known as micro four third lens mount. So the benefit of that is like flat out, it's like almost like you can put Canon lens on Nikon. It's something like that, where you can, if you are like, hey, Olympus lens is good, I'm gonna buy that lens, and I think Panasonic body is better, I'll buy Panasonic body. Or you can do vice versa. And because this is open, it's not like, okay, they have diverged. This is an open standard. Any basically lens manufacturer can manufacture it, be it Sigma, be it Tamron, be it Tokina, be it Voigtlander, and 100 other companies. So that was their main gamble. So because they knew from day one, if they are making interchangeable lens camera, they have to have a lot of lens selection, and not only best of the best lens selection, they also have to have something cheap. That is the sole reason why Nikon started f4, releasing f4 zoom for Z series rather than f2.8, because yeah, f2.8 would be great, it's just people would not gonna buy it. So you have to ease people into it. Hey, f4 is good, what if f2.8 is would be even better? That is why they wanted such a good large oomph selection of lenses. So flat out, one thing I respect about Panasonic is they do not have conflict of interest within themselves, and they are like, okay, I'm gonna make a camera and it's gonna be best goddamn camera in terms of user interface and second best in goddams of ergonomics. Flat out, I'm genuinely horrified how badly Canon designed basically EOS RP and R series, while Nikon is just like, are you serious? Like, are you the same company that has been working for 100 years? Like, genuinely surprised. Like, one is 50 years old, another is 100 years old, and their camera genuinely sucks. Like, flat out, it's like, who came up with that design? And Sony, let's not even go there, because it took Sony like 8 years to realize that, oh, people should be able to use their hand to grab the damn camera. So in terms of ergonomics, in terms of user interface, flat out, I respect Panasonic. It's like, even when they are making micro four third, you can hold the camera, it's like, damn, it's nice, it's easy to hold, it's whoa. So they have my respect for that. On top of that, the sole reason why we have four third, APS-C and all that jazz is simply because in early days of silicon manufacturing, making large sensors was flat out impossible. Because even if you made a sensor, there is a very good chance, because you take wafers, you have like large silicon wafers, and those wafers are limited in size. You cannot make a larger wafer, like they are limited in maximum diameter, because those are like one crystal that is grown. So if you grow them much larger, they will end up by internal defects. So there is a limit to that. So again, you have first starting point that is already limited. And in the early days, the manufacturing process on those silicon, what we call photolithography, was not that good, where you can like, okay, I'm gonna fit, let's say, 80 sensors on this, all 80 will work. Like they started with that and they were like, okay, 50% does not work. So flat out, they started to make smaller units. Benefit of that, because they could fit hundreds of them, there was a much higher yield capacity. Basically, 70% of them will be usable, 90% of them would be usable. Again, that changed because lithography got so much attention from every Tom, Dick and Harry, be it Samsung, be it Nikon, be it Canon, be it basically every company under the sun. So, Sony Semiconductor, the technology improved drastically. It improved to a point where Panasonic themselves can sell you GH5 for $2,000 and they can sell you Panasonic S1 for $2,000. One is a full frame, which is 4 times larger the surface area. Why? Because flat out, the silicon, in the early days, silicon was the expensive part. Now it's the cheap part. So what is more expensive about this? Why it is so expensive? Because the processor. Now this is one thing you have to understand. Processor on a camera is so damn difficult, so damn complicated, and because they are not using standard processor, it's not like they're going to Snapdragon and buying it. But Snapdragons are better. Why? Because they're getting much more money, much more R&D, and much tougher competition. So they are much better, but they're not buying that. It's not like they're gonna buy a Snapdragon and put into that. So they have to build their own processor. Be it Nikon in Expedus system, Sony in Bravia system, Bravia or Expedite in general. All of them have their own system, Huha and all that jazz. Panasonic is the best because Panasonic in this small body, without overheating, without needing a radiator to cool that damn thing, they achieve 4K 60 frames per second. Right now that's not possible. On top of that, not possible in full frame, they achieved 400 Mbps. Now 400 Mbps is very damn high. Many times people understand have hard time understanding why the heck 4K 60 frames per second is not possible in full frame when you can do that in your iPhone, when you can do that on a cheap Android phone. The reason for that is Mbps. If you talk about the Mbps on a mobile system, it's barely reaches 50 to 70 Mbps, barely. Like let's put 100 at upper maximum. That's the same range as GoPro 4K 60 frames per second. This puppy goes to 400. Now again, this is not that great because the moment you touch into cinema cameras, the small B becomes big B, basically 8 times, and Red Epic goes to 600. So you get the idea. So it is quite amazing they are doing that. And not to mention, Panasonic did something amazing. They directly paid the taxes. So that is why GH5 has no recording limit. So even though it was released before the tax was removed, they paid the taxes and customer got a camera without recording limits. So they have amazing processor. Like to give you an idea, they can do 10-bit internal. Why is that important? Again, 8-bit is so tight in terms of how much color gradation you have. You have to nail your exposure very well. Like you have to in terms of videos, this is your exposure window, you have to make sure you're inside it. When you are talking about 10-bit, the window becomes much more, you are like, okay, I'm comfortable with this. So doing that is amazing. It requires higher end processor. They have it. So you have to understand, I respect their processor industry. Like to give you context of that, Sony in their cinema lineup, they have 6 and 7 processor. In terms of Canon's Olympic grade cameras, they have dual processor. In their cinema lineup, C300, C400, in those sort of series, they have multiple processors. So flat out, amazing. They have my respect for that. Now, in terms of image stabilization, they are on a god tier level. There is no competition here. Nothing comes even close to the optical image stabilization of this. Why? Because they understand physics apparently. No Tom, Dick and Harry can figure out your lens must have optical image stabilization for it to work because dual IS. What does that mean? Think of it this way. Let's say you have a camera and you moved it 5mm. Your system, whatever your system is correcting, it has to move basically that much in the negative direction. Here's the deal. If you have to move one thing that much, it has to accelerate much faster, it has to decelerate much faster. Side effect, it cannot be done. Flat out your video will be jerky. But Panasonic figured it out. What if we move the lens 2.5mm and move the sensor 2.5mm? Benefit, much smoother acceleration and deceleration on the electronics, and it can respond to much quicker. That is why their lens is floating and the sensor is correcting. One is doing the cursor movement. Oh, move this much, and the lens is okay, let's change it. It's amazing. People are getting handheld clean shot at 4-second exposures. They know this. I'm a bit worried about Sony. Sony are removing OSS from many of the new lenses, and they should not do that because that is the only reason you have Panasonic and Olympus. Both of them put OSS, basically optical image stabilization, in their such a small system. They have to get that floating feel. People simply don't even buy gimbals with this. It's damn, it's that good. And if you have wide angle lens on that, you don't even need anything after that. It's It's just done awesome. So they have the greatest image stabilization, greatest processor. So let's talk about the problems. Well, first you have to understand, if first impression matters, almost all mirrorless destroyed that in the first go, flat out in the beginning. And I'm talking about every Tom, Dick and Harry company that made mirrorless. They had ludicrously terrible battery life because they were working on the flawed assumption is that mirrorless is supposed to be a pocket camera. It cannot be a bloody pocket camera because of the lens. So they were trying to make it, and during this time they started to create a lot of pancake lenses and all that. Yes, side effect was battery, because again, you simply did not have enough physical area to put a big battery. The battery life was horrible, and you have to understand this. The battery life was horrible compared to cheap DSLRs, and I'm talking like D3100 at the same time, like D3100 and Canon EOS 550D. Those had better battery life than this system, while they were costing more. So flat out, many people simply gave up on the system. Battery life mattered. It's like you cannot be like a guy from I think at that time Pro VTV, he used to work there, and he's like, if you look at your camera wrong, the battery will die. Basically, it was really bad. So flat out, many people, even though they started the system with a lot of oomph, they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna deal with this. I'm going back to my DSLR because of the battery life. On top of that, even though they are charging the same amount of money as Sony is charging for Sony full frame A7 Mark III, $2,000, they do not have autofocus that even comes close to that. Now, same way, basically Panasonic figured out you have to have dual system in order to give you basically great image stabilization. Sony knows that you have to have that for autofocus. Sony's new basically some telephotos and new prime lenses are having dual autofocus system. Basically, they have one motor that is only doing coarse corrections and another doing fine corrections. So that is why, if you mount those lenses with their new A7, basically A9 Mark II, the autofocus is amazingly good. Now you remember, wasn't autofocus that good? Again, now it's higher than Olympic level, because if you take those sort of camera right now and you take a burst shot, let's say with A9 Mark I burst shot, you take a 100 photo or 200 photo of an Olympic event like a football or soccer or swimming or things of that nature, some shot will be out of focus. Now that some shot is like very few shots will be out of focus. And because they have dual lens system, basically one lens is like, I'm doing fine correction, I only have to move this much, another is doing the big correction, I don't have to be precise. It's amazing. So same way, they have to have better autofocus. They have to improve their autofocus. Right now, their autofocus is nowhere near Canon dual pixel autofocus. Fuji's contrast system, I'm saying Fuji's phase detect or Sony's phase detect. So they have to improve their autofocus a lot. Like that's their biggest hurdle right now. Now, second aspect, the crop factor. Now this is the most hotly constructed aspect. But here's the deal: you have to apply crop to the aperture also if you want to understand how your image would look if you were using a full frame. If you don't want to compare that, awesome, do whatever you want to do. But the moment people hear like f2.8 or f1.8, they expect a certain kind of result. That is why your mobile manufacturer is also working so hard to like f1.8 lens aperture and all that jazz. It does not work that way. You have to apply that crop factor to your aperture. If you don't do that, people will show this and that. It simply does not work, and people realize that very early on. People realize, now realizing this flaw, company like Metabones and Vortex came together, and they started to create what we call speed booster. Basically, because crop factor is a crop factor, they converted that crop factor into magnifying factor. Basically, they took the lens, let's say lens was projecting this much, they compressed it down. Like how telephoto, basically teleconverter boosts like this, they went like this. Okay, take all the data and then force it into the sensor. Thankfully, it can be done with Micro Four because the flange distance is so shallow. And it does work. Like this can remove your crop factor by 0.71%. This can remove your crop factor by 0.5. So you get the idea. Like these actually made this Micro Four Thirds successful, because once these started to come in, both of them for Canon EF lens, you can mount really high quality lenses on that and actually get the background blur and all that really start to look like, oh, now you're talking. And it also bypasses the noise issue, because it's physically forcing more light into the small area. You're getting much better signal to noise ratio. So everything became awesome. Again, I would love it if it was like 2x, but again, that would be too expensive. Like it has to almost touch the edges of the system. So that this was like basically final nail in the coffin, because even if people were like skeptical of that, once they realized that why the heck these amplify their aperture, it's like, I get it now. So that resulted into lower sales. Right now, if you go into Amazon, it's like, okay, for past few years, let's say past 2016, show me top selling cameras, basically interchangeable lens camera. It's like Canon and Sony, Nikon. That's it. Like Fuji somewhere in the bottom, like how many units sold? It's very few. Like compared to Sony, basically Canon and Nikon. Now, why Sony is so important, even though Sony is second standard and Sony is making so much, is because Canon is selling lower ends, basically their D800s, D200, hundreds of they have hundreds of small models. Those they are selling, but again, those are not that profitable. They want to sell 5D, Mark II, and all that. And Sony is selling in the same amount their full frame system. So they are making much more money per unit sold. So that is why Sony is growing while Canon is suffering minus 68% profit loss. And they have been like doing like this. If they're for past 10 years they have been losing. After 2010 they have been going downhill. So same happened with Panasonic system. This system did not gather. It had a very bad start. The autofocus was not good enough. Not to mention the cost was more or less same as basically full frame, which has the largest lens selection because it's been going on for 100 years and it has reliable autofocus. So people, and after these started to hit the market, people were like, okay, I finally realized that crop factor does crop the aperture. Again, you can go all around, no, it's doing this and that, is just, it does that, just let it go. That is why these things exist. That is the whole reason. The sales were not that high in terms of numbers sold. It was so low that Panasonic in their own financial reports no longer even have an interchangeable lens department. It used to be in there in the first place, but now it's like, optics department, like they're merging that into smaller things. It's not that profitable. So that leads into fewer service center. I said Sony has few service center. This puppy, like literally Sony will look like, oh, it's everywhere. Sony has like a 600 service center in India right now for Alpha series system. They have almost negligible. Like they have Panasonic service center for refrigerator, televisions, sound systems and all that jazz, but not for camera. So their handycam, they do have a lot of service center because handycams are quite successful in India. So these are the problem with Panasonic. So what can we expect in the future? Well, you have to understand that while the system is not comparable to a full frame, it is still a very good camera system. Like it's amazing for retirement camera. Basically, if you are like, okay, I no longer have to take a photo which has to be the best of the best of the best goddamn possible because I'm making money out of it. This can apply like a very good camera. And many people flat out say, hey, my full frame will give me better result. I'm not taking it. Why? Because I'm old. I'm not gonna carry that, on a mounted trail and all that jazz. So people are starting, it's amazing, basically retirement camera. And in terms of streaming, this is one of the best option out there, like flat out. This will beat in like a 40,000 rupees Micro Four Third will destroy a 40,000 rupees DSLR in terms of video performance and output. And not to mention, many of them have clean HDMI output, which flat out Canon refuses to do. In their even 800D does not have that, and their other systems and all that. You can just buy Camlink, which is not that expensive. It's less than $100 or 8,000 rupees, and you can just have HDMI converted into system. Amazing output, and especially because this is so cheap, you can have like 4 or 5 multicam setup. So for streaming, this is a godsend system because flat out there is no basically camera webcam, so to say, that can do proper 4K 60 frame per second. Most of them 60K for full HD, 4K 30, or like those who can do, the bit rate is so low that it's not that good. It's like, okay, it's better than nothing, it's not that good, but if the moment you use a basically DSLR or a Micro Four Third, amazing. So really useful. Now Panasonic learned this the hard way, that crop factor does apply. So they also are like, okay, I'm done. They're creating their S series lineup. Now they did a very interesting thing, is that they created the L mount alliance. Now again, Olympus should have jumped into this, but they did not. So, and again, Olympus had been losing money so much that now they are considered as a brand. Basically they might be sold to another company. Same way, like Jaguar was a company in the beginning, now it's just a brand. It's sold to Tata now. So things of that nature can happen with Olympus also. But Panasonic is like, okay, we're gonna create a full frame system. Now they need lens. Lens is the most important thing. And not to mention, many people say you need the best lens possible. No, if you gonna make a best lens possible, let's say in case of Canon, red ring lenses, they're not gonna sell because nobody is gonna directly jump into that kind of money. Nobody's gonna invest that kind of money. Some people will do, but most people will not. So that is the reason people want low end lenses as a starting point. Hey, buy f4 lens. Hey, this is good. What if now I buy 2.8? Like if you directly only have 2.8, the moment people see the price, is like, yeah, I'm not touching this. So that is the reason even in Nikon series they are releasing f4 rather than f2.8 in the beginning, because they want to ease people into it. Hey, you have to spend a lot of money, but once you do that, you're like, f4 is good, f2.8 is better. now you know how to spend that money. And not to mention, third party also allows you that same luxury. So Sony bought 20% market share in Tamron, and that is why Tamron is releasing awkward lenses is like, 28 to 70, like 24 to 70 should be, but I get it. Sony does not want to create a conflict of interest, so Sony bought that. And Panasonic, realizing that they need a third party lens manufacturer to ease their pressure, they went directly into Sigma. Sigma is like, okay, and because they have Leica also, if you want ludicrously luxurious lens, you can buy Leica. So there is future is quite hopeful. However, the time is very short. They do not have too many years left, because in 2010 market started to go down. This is 2020. The market has almost crashed. It's like flat out in terms of how many units are being sold. It's negligible. And not to mention, because of artificial intelligence that are now baked into the processor of your mobile phone, the competition is very stiff, like especially for a small sensor. Flat out, I don't recommend anybody buying small sensors for basically, if you are making money out of it, try to get full frame if you can. Again, I understand if certain scenarios you flat out can't do that, I get that, but again, try to get full frame as early as possible, flat out, because the low light performance used to be the holy grail, and now you can basically Google Pixels are beating that in low light. Again, it's doing artificially, but it does not matter because the output is that good. So future, well, it depends on Panasonic. Panasonic only has like 2-3 years. If they can really flush out some good cameras, which they have done, but they still have to fix the autofocus. They have to fix the damn autofocus. So this was my presentation on Panasonic. I hope you liked it, learn from it. In that case, please click the like button. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I'd urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me your extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.